be on stage with three names who are well known. Your companies have been in the headlines. You have been in the headlines. You have so much to teach people who aspire to become entrepreneurs to do well. Let's start by some introductions. I know that we have already been introduced by name, but there is a lot more to know about yourselves as entrepreneurs. Could you each of you please give a few words about how did you get into entrepreneurship? What's your background? How did you get started? What inspired you?
Happy to fire first. Hi, hello everyone. Good morning. I'm Varun Alagh. In Hindi they say avashakta avishkar ki janani hai. English basically means need is the mother of all inventions. And in our case and in most entrepreneurial journeys, one of the strongest drivers is a need that you have experienced yourself. When we were going through our early years of parenting, we realized that there were not many toxin-free offerings available in India. And it felt like clearly a gap, and a gap that was causing stress amongst parents because they couldn't find the right products for their kids. And that is what really led to a problem becoming a passion, and a passion becoming an idea that we worked on and created a company out of it. And that's what inspired us to start.
Thank you.
You want to take next?
So I think my journey has been very different. I think I'm very lucky to be sitting with two gentlemen who've had a phenomenal 0 to 1 journey. And I think me and Varun have been colleagues at Unilever. For many professionals, I would also encourage people to say that, 0 to 1 is not the only path. You also have an opportunity to be a late-stage entrepreneur. When you join ventures where you have an opportunity of taking a business from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100. So I was lucky to come across the Good Glam Group, where I today lead the entire D2C business on brands, where we are scaling D2C brands to become mega brands. So it is a late-stage entrepreneurship opportunity, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. So to that extent, it's a similar ride, but ahead in the journey. So different challenges, but very exciting.
Yeah, for me, the journey was started very early. It's been 22 years as an entrepreneur, 2 failures under my belt and 2 good successes. But I think it was more to do with, being on, it was that itch from a very early stage in life. But I spent 7 good years working for great organizations which built the foundation of, the whole, the individual who then could kind of confidently go and stand and say, okay, I can be on my own and, take that plunge. So I worked for 2 years in the erstwhile DCM group, and then for 5 years in a global role in ICI. So it was a great experience working with these for these 7 years, and then kind of taking a plunge. And even then failed many times over. I think I have more failures to my resume than successes, but it's good fun. I think the journey has been incredible. And at the end of the day, I have no regrets. So, and given a chance, I'll do it all over again. So it's good fun.
I love how all your journeys have been so different, yet you have arrived at the same pinnacle of achievement somehow. And the interesting thing when you say 0 to 1, 1 to 100, this is a huge leap. Conviction alone, I think, is not enough for many startups. Otherwise, we have a lot more unicorns out there. There must be some strategy, some form of thinking, some vision, some skill. So my question for all of you, and I think a lot of people would be very curious to know this as well. As you scale, you go from 5 people to 50 people to 5,000 people. Your structure, how do you structure your company? How do you change your own leadership style? How do you evolve your processes to keep up? When you are fast growing, this move from 5 to 5,000 happens within a few months maybe. How do you keep up? How do you adapt so quickly? What's your secret? Who would like to go first?
I don't know if there's a secret to it, but one of the things that I at least have gone through and believed is that every 2 years in a startup journey, you need to fire yourself and you need to hire yourself again as a CEO, as a founder. And you need to actually prove to yourself what is it that you're now hiring for, and do you fit the bill or not, right? To do justice to the company that you're building. And for that, you actually need to keep reinventing. You need to keep, your early journey might involve a lot more micromanagement because you're probably the only one who's actually thinking, and there are far more folks who are only on the execution side. And as you bring more talent to the table, and you've got to act as a multiplier and actually extract their intelligence, and which is a very different role from a role of someone who's actually hustling hard and dealing bringing change. So I think from that perspective, be it structures, be it your own role and how you approach it, every 2 years you need to ask yourself, is the organization designed right to achieve what we need to achieve from the next 3 years perspective? And am I behaving in the right manner to actually lead that organization which we want to build? So I think that's what we have followed at least.
There is a lot of humility in your last line. Would anyone?
So I think the point from what Varun said, I think it actually starts with the foundation of core values. I mean, what I learned very early in my life is the company and its culture is a reflection of you as an entrepreneur and your own core values. So when you're starting up, it's always good to sit down and write what you stand for. And these could be 3 or 4 very core statements that were very intrinsic to your own behavior. And then see if you can imbibe those as a part of your, building the organization. And of course, the next big step is being able to hire people who are smarter than you. I think that's very, very important because, a lot of times I've seen in a lot of organizations I've been, mentoring and coaching, the entrepreneurs tend to hire just about anybody. And that's, I think, one of the cardinal sins that people commit in the journey of growth. So you need to get very smart people to be in the organization. And then empower them to build it. And then, as Varun said, you have to redesign the organization every few years. Because when you are a fast-growing organization, you switch from a hustling organization to an organization that's ready, is working with a steady set of processes, and you have to change that very quickly. And within that organization, also different pockets will have different culture sets. So there will be a team of hustlers who will always be there, who will be always doing something different, who will always be hustling, who will always be creating. And then you have a team of people who will be running the rest of the organization and will be responsible for generating revenues and meeting the timelines and so on and so forth. So it's a very intense cycle, but it happens over years and stages. And you have to be very persistent and resilient through that journey.
I think it's also about finding that balance, because I think one big change that I find now coming in fresh is that in fast-paced organizations, especially when you're looking for that exponential growth, you have to trust immensely, right? And it doesn't happen when, in an environment where you are not able to, A, having the right people, but B, giving them a lot of space to do their best. Because unless we don't create micro-entrepreneurs within the organization who are supremely empowered, you don't see those pockets of mega growth. So that, I think, is a huge change. And in that context, result and control become inversely related. So if you want fantastic results, leaders will really have to give up control. And that's when you set the organization free to create that discontinuous growth.
So what I'm hearing here is that firstly, there's a lot of intentionality involved. You cannot just let it flow. You have to think in advance. You have to think now, in the future, maybe 10 years down the road, even though you're not certain whether your company will still be around by then. Not only that, there is this very fine balance between flexibility and rigidity. What you mentioned about micromanagement, about having to adapt. So the trick really would be, would you say, am I correct in saying that it is walking this tightrope? On one side, you leave people with the flexibility to do the work you need them to do. On the other hand, you have to brief down their necks to make sure that they are doing what is right for the company. So this leads on to another question. I think many people find this very familiar. It's the question of perfectionism and the fear of failure. This is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs run into, the need to be perfect, and then when it collapses, they don't want to start again. But you guys have been able to, Ajay, you said you have been able to come back from failure after failure. Can you share a bit more about this? How do you overcome this fear of, not...
Yeah, I think the whole thing is about accepting failure. I think that doesn't come very easily. A lot of times, and I think that goes back to our education system in India, where we are kind of the way we are brought up and the way we are educated, we are told that you have to pass or you fail, right? So I think it comes with a little bit of that stigma. Failure comes with a little bit of stigma, right? So when you turn an entrepreneur, you have to kind of accept that as a fact that in 1 year you'll probably see one success and probably 100 failures. And can you accept? Can you stand up? And that's the culture. Can you build it in the organization? So people who are then responsible for creating those hustlers in the team, can they also accept that failure and move on? I mean, I've seen, particularly working with millennials, the new generation, that, and I was telling Sukhleen earlier today that, you know, if things go well, I've seen people having beer at breakfast. They can enjoy it any time of the day, but when things are not going well, you know, it's at that point the team needs a mentor, and that's where the entrepreneur has to turn a mentor as well. Because you've yourself seen a series of failures and learned to come out of them. So failure is a part of that journey, and you have to accept it. And one thing I kind of learned very early in my career and my life as an entrepreneur, and I say it to every new joinee in Northbridge today, is that if you make a mistake, it's fine, absolutely fine. Just don't hide it. Bring it on the table and own it up. It's fine. We'll figure out a way. Everybody's made mistakes. That's my cheerleader gang, by the way. So. But everybody's made mistakes and made tons of it. It's fine to just accept and move on. Varun.
No, I think, again, fear is an emotion.
Yeah.
And you in your heart need to find an emotion which is stronger than that. Sometimes that emotion can be love for your purpose, right? And that emotion will then beat fear day on day on day on day. And some other times, for example, to start something, fear of regret versus fear of failure. Actually, fear of regret is a much stronger emotion. You trying and failing, you can still live with. You not even trying is a much worse feeling to live with. And if that feeling helps you overcome the fear of failure or fear of, am I going to fail? And actually use that feeling to overcome. And so find that emotion in yourself that will help you come over fear of failure. And I think that's really at the heart of it, what we all need to do.
And I think if to build on what Varun also said, this is a very real emotion. Like even when you see young people today, the fact that I find so many more young people a lot more entrepreneurial is because there's a huge desire to try something new, right? And I think that's a very powerful emotion, which can actually help you overcome the fear of not having tried and therefore failed. But I think the second related point is also as leaders, how comfortable are we embracing failure, right? Because the tone of the organization is really set by the leader. If we are ourselves very okay saying, you know what, I didn't know this, and accepting when you don't know something, and recognizing with all humility that can we do it a bit better, maybe I could have done it differently, and just making it a very normalized part of conversation as much as we talk about things that did well. I think that just makes the environment so much easier to not stigmatize failure and celebrate success in a way that it polarizes. And in a fast-paced companies, you are failing fast. You are constantly experimenting, things are not working. But what I find extremely refreshing in the environment now is the ability for people to walk across and say, you know what, this didn't work. Let's move ahead. And just that culture keeps that flow and momentum going. And that I think is very energizing if we don't stigmatize failure.
What I'm hearing here is really that the success of a fast-growing company comes very much down to the emotional maturity of the leaders. I'm seeing so much forgiveness, so much humility, so much courage, so much love. Guys, please give them a clap. Please give them applause. Now, what that also adds up to is that I think you are all bosses that everyone would love to work for. And that brings us to the question of talent strategy. So we now know that right now, it's a kind of difficult time to hire. But fast-growing companies, especially, when you go to that team of 5 to team of 5,000 and you hire, how do you shape your talent strategy, especially in an economy like this? How do you draw people to your company when there are so many other fast-growing companies out there? Yours stands out, but so does everybody else's. How do you shape your talent strategy? How do you draw people? How do you keep them? Who would like to start?
No, I think, and I actually have very strong views on some of these areas, but I genuinely believe we are going through a cultural disruption of talent. And especially when you're building a young company or when you're building a fast growing company which has a different DNA, and your hiring practices also need to look different. Right? Just to give you a few examples of what 10 years back we used to get hired for, and how we are hiring for, and how sort of, some of that differs, right? I mean, and it's just the change in terminology itself, right? And 10 years back, we would look for years of experience. Now we look for number of experiences in a year. That makes more difference to us. 10 years back, we look for skills learned. Now we look for learning skill. If you have the ability to learn, I would rather value that more than what you have learned in the past. 10 years back, I would look for a number of achievements. Today, I would look for hunger to achieve. I don't want someone who's full in terms of the brim. I want someone who's actually hungry, right? And I think those value system disruption itself that you accept and then you shape towards what kind of people are we looking for, and is a very, very important shift that we all need to make while thinking of hiring itself. And because that's where actually a lot of diversity of talent is coming in. That's where this whole belief of only X number of years person can do a Y job is sort of, changing. And I think that's something that we've clearly embraced, right? And our hiring and our hiring practices actually reflect a lot of that as we grow.
I love that you're talking about hiring for potential rather than grades, because as we have been discussing, we need to break free of this mold that people come up with. Anyone would like to add to that, please?
I think, but if you see young companies, the very reason why they succeed is because they break the mold. And I think that kind of reflects in the people who make that happen as well. And fundamentally, a young company can only thrive when the people who are making it happen every day are extremely hungry to break new ground. So in that context, I think definitely there's a premium on younger, hungry people, people who are problem solvers. But I think more than anything else, extreme resilience. Because in a young company, you need more resilience than you've ever needed. Emotional maturity and a lot of just belief in yourself that it's going to be okay. And more than anything else, fast-paced companies do need people who have a growth mindset, who challenge things, who are very comfortable with genuinely believing sky's the limit. Because if you are constantly constrained by your own beliefs, then you don't break new ground. So I think these are some of the factors which actually become extremely critical, much more critical than your achievements and your number of years, right? Because if you have that resilience, you will survive. Because there are going to be more days which test you than days that you are rewarded for. So I think in those days, you do need your personal resilience to shine through.
Yeah, I think one point I'd like to add here is that, all three of us have background of working with traditional organizations, right? So we've seen the traditional waters. We've had our own share of experiences. I mean, I've experienced political powers, small circles and cohorts within organizations where people would try to just retain a certain process and certain way of thinking or just an approach to problem solving just because that would give them some kind of a power, kick. But fast-paced organizations absolutely just cannot tolerate that kind of behavior. I think it's basically people who can adapt very quickly, people who can say no and accept failure very quickly, move on, because we fail very, very fast. At any point in time in Northbridge, for example, we have at least in every function, we have 3 or 4 experiments going on which are being run by different cohorts of people. Out of those 3 or 4 experiments, we are absolutely certain that more than 60% of those experiments will fail. And the teams that are working with also have that approach that we might fail, but the organization is willing to accept that failure. We are not going to be thrown out because we'll fail. So they're okay to fail. They're okay to try everything. They're okay to experiment with new stuff and fail. And the other thing which I've seen particularly now is and I heard it yesterday in some of the forums. In the traditional organizations, I've seen a lot of phobia for technology. People are scared of adopting technology. In new fast-paced organization, technology is the way of life. I haven't, in Northbridge or I'm sure in a lot of fast-paced organizations, I don't think you'll be able to hire a good employee if you tell him that the leave and attendance system is still running on the archaic processes. You come and sign a register. People won't even work for you. You have to bring technology and you have to get your people work very closely on those frameworks, learn very quickly. Acceptance of some of these new ways of working has to be judged as a part of the assessment process. And hiring is never easy. Some of the best tools in the world and the best interviewers in the world also come and say that they only succeed 20% of the time, which means some of the best interviewers in the world interviewing 100 people can only select 25 right. 100 offered and 25 people only actually perform and do a good job. So it's science and an art at the same time. So there's nothing right, nothing wrong, but some of these elements have to be judged: the resilience and ability to learn and unlearn quickly, and being able to accept failure as you go through the journey. That's very, very crucial behaviors.
Thank you for that. So, hiring managers, recruiters, managers, people who are in charge of deciding what technology to adopt, please take note. There's a lot to be learned here. And on that note, I'd like to open the floor to a few questions. Would anybody have some questions for our speakers?
Yes. So Mike, you just have to hold it close and
Mike,
speak.
please.
Hold it close.
Okay. Hi. Hi. So
Yeah.
let me just give my quick introduction. I'm leading talent acquisition for TechHR Pharmaceutical. We are Japanese multinational. So as you mentioned, the hiring is never be easy. So how we communicate to our stakeholders, because hiring manager always say, oh, this position is extremely critical for me, get the resource and all. And then they don't understand what talent acquisition is going through that process. So what suggestion you would like to share so that we can handle in a better way? Because hiring is stressful, yes.
So there's no answer, so easy answer to that. I think the way we've tried to solve the problem is that for every position that is released or is released to the talent acquisition team, the talent acquisition team is expected to sit down with the line managers, discuss with a set of profiles and say, do these profiles really fit into your need? They may or may not be ready profiles, but just go to LinkedIn and say there are these 5 people. Is this the kind of structure, experience, learnings that you're looking at? And then go after really identifying. And you have to have a culture round in the assessment process. In Northbridge, we make sure there is cross-functional interviewing. So it's not just the person is not just hired for the function. The person is being hired in the organization. So there has to be somebody from a completely unrelated function who has to come and interview the person, and totally from a culture fitment standpoint. And that has to be hard-coded in your hiring process. We have assessments hard-coded, and nobody's allowed to kind of short-circuit those processes. And that's been built in the organization DNA at a very early stage. So we've been able to kind of build it that way.
Okay.
I see 3 hands.
Good morning. My name is Rashmi, and really appreciate all the insights that you've shared. My question is more towards how do you take that plunge? What are some of the first steps that you would recommend, and all 3 of you rather, if you could just share what is the first step that you can think of anybody who's working in an organization. There is, everybody has monthly financial commitments, etc. So how do you just move on from there, take a plunge, and get into something of your own? So that's what I'll be keen to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Everyone's journey is their own. You need something to firstly inspire you a lot, and something that actually keeps you awake, right? Because in the journey itself, you are going to go through lots of ups and downs. and you need that strong feeling and emotion which will ensure that it keeps you going. Right? While that's the soft side of it, you also have to prepare for hard sides of it. Right? I mean, when I was going through it, I did have a chat with a few consultants as well, saying, "Yaar, if I do this for 3 years and I fail, right, what will be my employability level? Will I be employable? What kind of jobs will I be able to get?" Right? And most of the answers that I got were fairly positive, right? Because the skills that you learn over these 3 years, right, actually everyone found would be so useful that there'll be a lot of different kind of opportunities which will get generated, which will be fairly satisfying in nature. Again, thinking about your lights on expenses as to you will need to kuch paane ke liye kuch khona padta hai. You will need to sort of sacrifice a few things. You will need to sort of say bye-bye to some of those foreign vacations, etc., right? And some of the large spendings that you wanted to do, right? But even after that, there'll be a certain lights on budget that you will need to figure, okay, to live comfortably in terms of, so that every morning you're not wondering, okay, my personal pains are so large that I'm actually not able to focus on my professional vision, right? Or my entrepreneurial vision, right? Those pains need to get covered, right? I mean, food on the table, education, basic education for kids, right? And all of that needs to get covered. And what is the minimum requirement for that coverage? And are your savings enough to sort of, at least give you 2 years of cover, right? Are some of the practical things that you also need to prepare for, right? Because effectively there is a possibility that something might not work, right? But during that journey, right, it shouldn't break you personally, right? So I think anything you would like to add?
Yeah, as Varun said, there's no right or wrong answer. And I think so you need to find that real reason why you want to do it. I think that's very important, that incentive, that real emotion that's driving you to do it. And, when I've kind of met potential entrepreneurs, a lot of people, when they ask questions, that's my question, why do you want to do it? So I want to be my own boss, those kind of reasons don't work, right? You have to have a strong passion. I want to create something and I'm okay to give up a lot of my comfort and I'm willing to get out of my comfort zone for a reasonably long time, because it's not going to be a small journey. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years and many failures. So you have the ability to handle it. And then, of course, your lights on expenses you need to take care of. Some piece you need to have. But sometimes that also is a positive pressure on you as an entrepreneur, right? So you have to find a way to make your business make money for you. Right? Otherwise, a lot of new age businesses I see, they're paper business plans. They just create a plan and they want to go and raise tons of money and they think that's the right way of building businesses. Not necessarily. You have to have a very clear money-making idea, and sometimes that necessity to make money, that real need to make money, can help you do a lot of things much faster than what you envisaged in the plan. So it's, at the end of the day, it's all about just taking the plunge. Just do it.
I would beg to differ. It is, sometimes the need to make money can also sway you from a much larger vision of creating an organization or an idea which could have made a much larger impact, right? I mean, if the team WhatsApp would have, the need to make money, right? They wouldn't have created the largest chat network that each one of you are on, right? And it still doesn't make money, by the way. Right? Whatever your reason is, right? Just make sure it is very strong to keep you going, right? It could be money, right? Or it could be something else that you want to really create, right?
Sometimes people also convert their passion into profession, right? Or sometimes you have monetizable skill sets. Think about the lawyers who set up law firms, or even for that matter, they are all entrepreneurs or designers who are scaling up today. So I'm saying we are only seeing it from the realm of organizations that do marketable products. But for individuals to take a plunge, it's also about asking yourself, what am I really passionate about? And is there a buyer for that? And can I create enough scale that sustains me and helps me grow tomorrow? Right? So to that extent, if you find a problem to solve that you're passionate about solving, then that just makes it easier. And second thing, which I've probably seen around me work as well, is to not worry so much about day after tomorrow. You know, just start one step at a time, because if you take the burden and the pressure of thinking too far and out, then you don't ever begin. So sometimes it's just okay to start, give yourself a few years. At least you would not regret not having tried, you know, and that's something that I think all of us deserve to at least try.
We did have one gentleman. We can only take one more, I'm afraid, so please, sorry to keep you waiting.
So my question is to Varun, and because Sukhleen and Ajay will also answer it. So I'm a third generation entrepreneur and an angel investor. Now Varun, you are an entrepreneur, you are an angel investor, you also acquired other companies. So I always have this entrepreneur versus investor dilemma. You know, when you are an investor, you get access to a lot of pitch decks. And then your entrepreneur's brain works and you feel that, okay, this is a good problem to solve. I have a background, I have an established business. So when you, as a dilemma, you try and solve that problem yourself as an entrepreneur, or would you rather just invest in somebody else and be a mentor and also? I mean, I constantly face this dilemma as an entrepreneur and as an investor. How would you tackle this? Because you would be facing this much.
No, I think for me it's very simple to tackle this. I honestly believe ideas have very, very low value. And in my book, execution is far, far more important. Right? And the most important resource that an organization has, right, is management bandwidth. Right? And what you put it out on, and that's true for you as a person, as an individual, as a founder as well. Right? Where you dedicate your bandwidth, right, is what you end up executing well and what you end up building well. Right? So if what you're doing today, right, you don't believe deserves all your bandwidth and something else does, right? Find then something else and then just put all your bandwidth in. But it can't be कि हर महीने कोई नया idea आएगा और you'll be able to give you bandwidth. You only have limited sort of time to give, right? On the rest, use another resource, which is money, to back other folks who will give the entire bandwidth to actually build it out, right? Which is what investment is all about.
And I think it's also important to look at whose idea is it and what kind of a team are you investing on. Because fundamentally, an idea will only see the light of the day or reach its milestone if that team has the right passion. So invest on people. They'll take the ideas to places. Because if you had to do it, then you would have done it, right?
Anything to add?
I think nothing else to add. I think it's clearly that's what it is. I think you have two resources to kind of invest, your time and your money. So sometimes you need to get your time to make money for you, and then other times you have the money to make money for you. So I think you just need to differentiate. There's no clear answer, but you'll have to kind of, if there's a good idea there which is synergistic with what you are doing anyways, right, you may like to take a small stake, help the entrepreneurs there build it if you believe in the team. It's the ideas, at any point in time, if somebody has an idea, I can guarantee to you there are 100 more people in the world who are carrying the same idea in their mind. It's that one person or those 5 people in 5 different parts of the world who are going to execute it well. So is that team that you're going behind or going with that team? You need to find that.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm so sorry that we cannot take further questions, but time really is money, and we have only so much bandwidth from our speakers. Thank you so much, all three of you, for being here today, and thank you for this fantastic
Thank you very
conversation.
much. Thank you.